in fairness to Abraham, he dressed up because I'm prepared for the snow apocalypse. And since I fall on the cusp of the 1980, 1990, I suppose that means that I'm also responsible for everything you just said. So, Kristen Chan-Miller, also known as KSM, around my office. So, let's talk about soul saving. So you're here, which means that you're already interested in saving your soul in some capacity, and thanks to the wonderful folks who are putting this event on tonight, you are already on the spectrum of being saved. However, I'm also a rule breaker, so despite Meg's very stern warnings that we not make this a pitch, this is a pitch. And this is a pitch to make curiosity an incredible part of your life. Now here's the thing. When I was 8, my parents applied for me to go to a private all-girls school, all-girls education all the way. If you remember being 8, you remember what it was like to sit in a room full of tests, perhaps for a day, on end, forever. So I went, for part of my application process, to take a bunch of tests. This was the last test of the day, after 8 hours of taking tests. I sat in a room across from a woman who was sitting with a stopwatch in her hand. She handed me a pencil, she said, "Go." I said, "Are you timing me?" She looked at me very calmly and said, "Why, yes." So I did what any normal person would do. I drew a bridge. And my mother is in the audience. She can actually verify that's a true story. But so began my total passion and my cemented love for the idea of inquiry. You run into a challenge, you ask a question first. This still gets me into trouble, let's just be honest. Why is this? As humans, we tell stories, right? We need context for what we do on a daily basis. We need to understand how our existence fits into the life of other people around us, of the situations that come up. Here's the thing, stories have a tendency to either be right or wrong. What if right is just a concept, right? It's just a comfortable thing that we kind of slip into because the story is right and it feels good. Well, I just want to pose the question, you might be wrong. Is that a bad thing? Maybe not. Some of you might feel uncomfortable with the idea of being wrong. So now all of a sudden we have these two magnetic poles. Either you're right in your story or you are wrong. That means there's nothing in the middle. What if? What if right or wrong are just concepts? And somewhere on the spectrum of, yes, you're right, the story you're telling yourself is right, and no, you're wrong, there is a space where you get to ask questions, you get to wonder, you get to be curious. Now, I know, I'm scared standing up here, so you must be scared in the audience listening to this idea of right or wrong or just a figment of your imagination. But being terrified means that you're asking the right questions. It means that you're willing to be curious. It means you're willing to be brave. And when you're willing to be brave, it means the people around you are seeing you be brave. They're seeing you start to ask questions that maybe mean you're not so afraid of being right or wrong. It just means that you want to have a little bit of inquiry, have a little bit of discovery. And when you do that, when you are brave, it means that you're being vulnerable. Now, I'll give credit where credit is due here. One of my favorite people in the whole universe who maybe someday I'll be lucky enough to meet, a woman named Brene Brown, who has this idea that when you're vulnerable, you're allowed to be creative. There's all sorts of other things that are a part of that. Part of it is that you give people around you the permission to be brave, to be vulnerable, to be curious, to ask questions, right? And then that empowers people. So now we're not just right and wrong. We're somewhere in the spectrum of let's all give each other permission to be a little bit vulnerable, maybe be a little bit curious. And then, of course, typically all hell breaks loose because the rules don't apply anymore. And if you live in the creative universe that I live in, our little creative agency, you need some rules, and that's not such a bad thing. I'm looking at my fellow project manager, Meg Dalton. Here's the thing. So I have this terrible habit, with quotes, of asking questions, starting a conversation with questions. And my boss is here, he can verify the fact that sometimes in our studio, conversations start with, KSM, now don't ask me any questions. Okay, I'll just sit there and be a little quiet. So this is the pitch. My pitch for you is that you find a question to love. The next time you're in a situation where you think you need to be right or you need to be wrong, find a question. Find something to explore within that moment that gives you a little bit of space to be something other than right, something other than wrong, something different, and gives other people permission to do the same. And part of it for me is bringing that full circle, right? You're not just loving the question, but you're asking questions. You're finding better questions. Because if we have all the answers, well, that's pretty boring. Pardon my language, I know I'm being taped. If you know the answer already, then why are we here? What's the point, right? So from there, this is my pitch to you. Love the inquiry. Draw the bridge. Find something to be vulnerable about. Give people permission around you to do the same thing. It's amazing to me what happens when you do that because you start to create an environment where people can make things happen that they did not think was possible before. So start again. Ask some questions. Thank you very much.